Hello, this is Robert Rickover. I'm an Alexander Technique teacher in Lincoln, Nebraska. I also teach in Toronto, Canada, and I teach online. My guest today is Eileen Troberman, and an Alexander Technique teacher in the San Diego area. And she also teaches online. And the topic we're going to talk about today is freedom of seeing with the Alexander Technique. Eileen, welcome.
Thank you.
So before we get to this topic, could you tell our viewers and listeners what is the Alexander Technique in a nutshell?
Well, one of my favorite definitions is the one that our main teacher used, which is it is the study of the efficiency of human movement. But another way that I do say it that might be even more understandable and interesting to people is it's how you reduce stress, strain, compression, discomfort, and pressure in your system.
Excellent. And that main teacher of ours, her name was Marjorie Barstow and lived in Lincoln, Nebraska. So tell me and our viewers and listeners what you have in mind with this topic.
One of the things that I've been noticing with myself, with others who have been at home a lot more in this time, who are spending a lot more time at home, also a lot more time in front of the screen, is that our angle of vision is quite often just forward and down. You know, we're looking at the computer screen, we're looking at our phones, we're walking around our house, there might be stuff on the floor, or we don't tend to walk around our house and kind of like, oh, the ceiling looks interesting today, or wow, look at that corner of the room. I never noticed that out there. So just almost everything, cooking, washing dishes, almost everything is forward and down. That certainly has an effect on our use. So use meaning what we do, how we move our body, or how we compress it or decompress it, and ways that we don't even realize that we hold our body in a position, which the idea is to not hold it in a position, let it be free with your movements. So because we're looking forward and down, people tend to pull their head a little forward and down without realizing it and compressing their spine and body.
Like this a little.
Yeah, everything's kind of like this. And even when they get up, they're still looking around here at this level. And I'm pretty sure the way we're wired to move from our start of movement when we're just after we're born is that we see something and that lets our head move. And when we were outside a lot more, there'd be trees, so we notice something in the tree or some clouds, what the sky looked like, or there's a building that's maybe we'd see the roof, or we'd see a taller building. So we would have a lot of that varied movement. And even back when we were driving more, our eyes are just very freely darting around to see what's around. And so that gave us more freedom of movement of our head, particularly on the upper couple of vertebrae, because those are so wired there's no direct muscles that attach there, but they're wired to go along with our eye movement. That's how when we're babies on the floor and mom's in front of us, we're like, that's how we start raising our head. And then she moves around here and we turn around. So it's really led by our eyes, not led in a way where it's just our eyes and then our head. So it isn't like turning your eyes as far as you can turn them or something without your head moving. But there's a real coordination to that. In fact, if you put your fingers alongside the center of your neck, not on the center where the back of the vertebra poke out, but just right alongside in a row, right
Mhm.
next to that.
Mhm.
And then you press in a little bit, not really hard, but you just press in a little bit. And then without turning your head right and left,
Mhm.
just look over to the right, very far over to the right, and then look to the left,
Mhm.
and then look to the right and see if you feel something deep under there moving.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
feel little
try on.
muscles.
Yeah, but
Look,
there's not a direct link, but there's a coordination, and it's so important
right,
for our
right.
survival. And so,
So what you're saying then is that we've kind of, by m- largely eliminating certain directions of looking, kind of let that ability atrophy a little bit, perhaps, or we're just not using it very much.
yeah, the ability doesn't atrophy, it's still there.
Yeah, but we just aren't
We're
using it.
limiting where our eyes go so it doesn't change a lot.
Right.
So, we don't like, oh, what's up there? And those things affect the freedom of our head, the movement, the variety of movement we make. And because of that, since our body is attached to our head is part of our body, the whole thing changes with it. But
Mhm.
we get used more and more to limiting ourselves to forward and down. And some of that's because of that's where our visual interest is.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so when you're walking around the house sometimes, just, maybe look around, see if there are any cobwebs up there.
Mhm.
Uh, just just decide, I'll look, make sure there's nothing I'm going to step on here. And then, I can look around. There might be something interesting that comes to your attention that you never noticed,
Mhm.
very likely. And it helps not only with this free movement of your head that affects the free movement of your body, the two go together instantly, but that those eyes, that interest of, oh, I'll look around over here. That little bit of interest of our eyes keeps our head very lively in its balance and therefore our body less compressed.
As you talk about that, I'm thinking about a student of mine who's a programmer and works, as he says, 8 hours a day. He's in front of a screen and very doesn't even get up and move around very much. And that, to me, seems like it would really start to just takes away a whole range of movement and whole ways of being that are less likely to be taken away if you're perhaps interacting with people and even in an office environment. He's in his basement. Um, yeah, so that's what you're talking about, right? That, that,
Absolutely, yeah. And then with the computer, it's even worse because, and I think it's because it's a light source.
mm-hmm,
I think, if not that I want you to look at a light, with a light bulb in it, but if you do, you see you lose your peripheral vision. If you're looking at a light that's turned on or a light bulb that's turned on,
mm-hmm,
you'll see that you don't have much peripheral vision.
right.
But if you turn that light off and you look at that light bulb, you still can see the light bulb. You can even focus on it, but you end up being able to include so much more in your peripheral vision.
So you're saying the light emanating from your screen is kind of sucking you in.
Yes, and
Yeah.
limiting your peripheral vision.
Now
I
you,
think if we
you
were to
could
do,
you could override that. I mean, I'm looking at it. We're both looking at screens right now, and I could let my mental and visual attention go to other parts of the room, as I'm just doing right now, and still talking to you. But it requires some conscious intervention on my part.
yeah, when you're actually talking to someone, I don't know about. I mean, that's fine too, but when you're sitting there and talking to someone on the screen, what you can do is you can think, wow, there's a whole bunch of stuff around my computer. And you can see that even as you're looking at me,
Mhm, mhm.
so there, if something did catch your attention there, you might notice it and turn and look, but yeah, they're just continuing to notice that there is that space around the computer. There's a distance, even between me and the screen, there's a certain distance. So
Mhm.
I can guess there's probably a distance between you and the screen because
I
your
hope
head is like
so. Yeah,
plastered on it.
yeah.
But if I think that way, it gives me a little more sense of depth, even though you're not deep in
Right.
the screen there. But it also helps me be aware that, hopefully there's not like dust or something floating around in the air here, but there's air here, there's substance. And
Right.
not that I'm seeing things in the air, but that just that awareness gives me graduated distance awareness instead of just one distance. Because when if we worked at the computer 8 hours a day, our focal length is just that distance.
Exactly.
But if you kind of think, well, there's a certain distance between me and the computer, and there's air there, there's stuff in between on the desk,
Mhm.
and then I'm assuming there's a distance there between you and the computer. That helps my focal length in looking at you. It gives it a little more variety. So there's that change too, besides the actual movement of our eyes,
So
what we're
could
looking.
could we, so in terms of uh, how someone might take this information and use it for themselves, it seems like it's largely a matter of making a decision that you're either going to take some little breaks from the computer and walk around to go outside, or even if you're using the computer, bringing an awareness that there's a whole room around you, a ceiling above you, floor below you, that kind of thing.
Yeah, taking breaks is wonderful because then you actually get up and move and
Right.
have pressure on one spot.
But
It
that's
is
going to
more-
take, either of those solutions is going to take a kind of a conscious decision on your part to uh, avoid the trap of being always focused on the screen in front of you, which is a pretty strong temptation with Zoom, or even Zoom groups, for example. You want to see who else is there in the group. Yeah. Any other thoughts on this?
looking up things on the computer or
Yeah,
doing emails.
anything you do on a computer can kind of suck you in. So do you have any other thoughts on this topic?
There are a few other sort of unrelated, I mean, they're related to vision and stuff, but not so much to this one, which has to do with looking around and particularly including levels that are not lower than eye level.
Hmm, hmm,
Looking out in the distance is really good, and then coming back, there's focal length, which we did talk about.
hmm.
But there's also, just looking out and looking a little bit up, even if
Hmm.
it's not a lot, looking and looking, actually being interested. Do you remember our teacher Marge used to always say, look around, have a
Yeah,
look around. Whenever someone was like stiffening or getting stuck in themselves, she'd say, well, look around, have a look around. And
yeah.
and yeah,
So
that actually like thinking, oh, I see this here and there's this here. And oh, that catches my eye there.
So F. Matthias Alexander, developer of our work, had in his office a number of little visual stimuli scattered around, particularly near windows and stuff, things of sort of interesting little objects that could attract someone's visual attention.
Bats, bats, things like
Like bats,
bats.
bats, bats. No, they were like little shiny objects, or I know, but I don't think he had any bats. That would certainly get your attention.
Yes, they could be hanging from something and then just
Yeah,
fly off and yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
But yeah, what did he have? I don't
I
actually.
think there's some photographs I've seen of his office where he had uh, almost little objects on the window that maybe glass um, things that would reflect light in interesting ways and interesting objects of various kinds. And I don't think he particularly talked about them with his students, but he wanted to encourage them to not go inward as much as a lot of people might tend to do.
Yeah, so there is just seeing things,
Right,
letting your eyes notice things, and then that affects your head movement.
right. Well, I
And
see you've got a
also
skeleton
the
there.
looking up a little
You've
bit.
got a skeleton in your teaching area. That obviously would attract some interest.
But from where you are, you could look up and I don't know what's up above your computer or,
Yeah.
over to the side. Yeah, just a quick little look. You don't need to
Well,
like,
I got these South American things on the wall. They're kind of eye-catching.
yeah, yeah. And you can
Um,
see how are
yeah,
they hung up there? What's
yeah,
that?
yeah.
And you let your whole body respond to it.
Mhm, mhm.
It's just that we end up doing this without real, and this becomes pretty normal, and then we get further interested in whatever we're looking at and this. And so we pile
Yeah,
this on during the day without even realizing we did. And we don't come all the way out of it. So a
exactly.
little bit of just looking around and just, I don't know if there's anything interesting you can put high up on your little, I
I
have,
have I have two mobile, not mobiles, mobiles.
I don't know how to say it right, but
I
I have
have
those.
two. I have two, one with fish and one with little black balls that look kind of cool. And they're in constant movement just due to air currents in the room. So
And they're in constant balance too, which
they
is
are. They
like
exactly.
we are intended to be.
Yep. So
Constant balance of areas
yeah,
of more weight and less weight. Yes.
yeah. Well, shall we end our conversation on that note?
That's a great note to end it on.
It would
Sure.
be a good note. So my guest today has been Eileen Choberman, a teacher in the San Diego area. I will put a link to her website by the interview, also a link to a site that will tell you more about the Alexander technique. Eileen, thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome, Robert.